Hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf and welcome to my podcast, Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. In today's podcast, I am responding to a lot of questions that I get about how do you recapture your identity after trauma. And as we know, trauma can happen to us in so many different ways, and you get really complex trauma and you get trauma that is still trauma but not as complex, and then you get less complex trauma. So trauma comes in so many different ways, but all the time it can really knock your identity, especially very complex trauma at early stages of one's developmental stages. But at any stage, if you get into a terrible marriage and you get abused in that marriage, your identity can go for a shot. If you involve with someone in your family who's got incredibly narcissistic type emotional behaviors, that can affect your identity. So trauma can affect you in so many ways. A young child being told that they can't cope or that they're terrible or whatever. We get things spoken over us that come from positions of authority or people that we look up to or people that have some kind of authority over us. It can really wire into our brain and affect our identity. So it's literally a situation of the toxicity wiring into our brain and blocking who we are. So we look at ourselves through this. And it actually happens. So if it's repeated often enough, within 9 weeks, if you've had the same thing said to you over and over, you will start thinking that's who you are. And because it's not who you really are, it's what someone else is thinking you are. And speaking that over you from their own complex trauma. So their complex trauma is manifesting through what they're saying into your life. But because of who they are in your life, it's affecting you, that then shatters your identity. So what I strongly recommend that you do as you listen to this podcast is also take the time to go back and listen to the other podcast I did on identity, where I spoke very specifically about the concept of identity, what it is, the science. And today I'm going to also talk about that, but I'm going to talk more around when you've had things spoken over you, how you can change that. But I really recommend pair it up with that podcast where I gave the broad overview and understanding of the science of identity and the science of being wired for love and the science of the fact that you can do something that no one else can do. Because it's a very encouraging podcast and the content in there will help you give you language and statements that you can use as you use the Neurocycle to help you restore your identity. So I'm going to also give you an example of using a Neurocycle to do that. And as you've heard me so many times before, the Neurocycle is how you get your wise mind talking to your messy mind to help you to rewire your brain, detox your brain, and detox your body from all those experiences that you've potentially had. Okay, so you'll find out about the Neurocycle in my latest book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, and also in the app, the Neurocycle app. So these podcasts are meant to give you direction and guidance in specific things, and then you dive in and you get the full program in the app or the book. I'd recommend both if you can get your hands on both. Okay, so getting back to the podcast details, just very quickly, I have my annual mental health conference, 2nd through the 4th of December in Dallas, Texas. It's going to be so practical, so hands-on. The kind of things that I discuss in my podcast, I'm going to be demonstrating there. Neuroplasticity techniques to rewire your brain, different techniques to calm down the neurochemistry in your brain, to deal with panic attacks, anxiety, the post-COVID, well, we're still in the COVID, but the impact of lockdown and all the trauma around COVID brain, depression, anxiety, warnings, which are warning signals, how to deal with these. So it's really practical, hands-on. I'm also going to be offering CMEs and CEUs, so if you need those, you'll be able to register separately for those. So join me at the conference. It's live, and the link is in the show notes. Just go to drleafconference.com. This podcast is for educational purposes and is not medical advice. So if you need medical advice, please contact the appropriate medical professional. And now on to today's podcast. So trauma, as we know, is absolutely horrific of any level. And it always upsets us and throws us out of balance because it is a psychoneurobiological experience. And by that I mean is that through our mind, which is the psycho part of us, the psych part of us, Our mind is our think, feel, choose. So as we're going through something, we're thinking about it, feeling and choosing, thinking, feeling, choosing, thinking, feeling, choosing at 400 billion actions per second. So we're receiving the experience through this think, feel, choose, which is energy that's generated in gravitational fields and electromagnetic forces and pushed into our brain. And as the mind shows up in the brain, as this experience that the mind is bringing into the brain, it shows up in the brain, it creates a reaction. The brain neurochemically and electromagnetically and genetically then converts that experience into physical changes in the brain that are made of proteins and chemicals and that look like trees. So if it's a toxic experience, there's my toxic tree, and if it's a healthy experience, here is a healthy tree. So these are thought trees. Thoughts look like trees. So every experience builds into your brain as a thought, and a thought tree, they look like trees. And as a tree is made of roots and branches, so a thought is made of memories, root memories and branch memories. I've done a podcast as well on the difference between thoughts and memories, and I would recommend you go listen to that as well to help you understand. But this, whatever that trauma was, has been built into your brain. Now, the more established the trauma was, so if you've constantly had things repeatedly said over you, this has become very strong. So if someone keeps saying the same thing to you day in and day out, within 63 days, it's become a long-term memory. 63 days later, it's become a very strong memory with a lot of power, and so on. So every 9 weeks, this thing changes in its power level. I mean, it's changing every day, but like big chunks of time, every 63 days is when we see massive chunks of change, massive energy changes in the brain. And if this is whatever you are, is getting the most attention, is growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and then this becomes the dominant force of how we are seeing things. Now, what's key with identity and trauma is the fact that the root part is the traumatic experience. It's the root, it's the origin story, it's what happened. Like any tree, when it grows, seed is planted, the roots grow, the tree trunk grows, the branches grow. This is what's happening with each experience that we have. The mind receives it, plants the seed in the brain, the roots grow, which is the origin, the story, what happened. And then this is how you're processing it, and then this is your interpretation. So as this thing happens, the interpretation happens. The root is the source memories, the interpretation memories. Source memories, the interpretation memories, and this is building and building as you go through the experience. So in any 30-minute session of a traumatic experience, for example, you're going to have a lot of roots grown and a lot of interpretation grown. And that then leads to coping skills and trauma responses. And I've also done a podcast on the trauma responses, which will also help you a lot in understanding and processing this particular podcast today. So they will build on each other to help you. Okay, so when we talk about trauma affecting identity, we talk about how we are seeing ourselves. So at our core, we see in our psychoneurobiology, this is a quick summary of, and if you want to go into more depth, go to the podcast on identity. But basically, we see that our brain and body are neurobiology and our body biology are wired for survival, for love. So therefore, you don't have things in your brain and your body that can accommodate for anything that's not going to work for you. So you don't have broken, unless there's like a traumatic brain injury. But I'm talking about your actual design of your wiring, how your neurobiology works. It works. What we study when we study neuroscience and biology and neurobiology, we see the marvelous and intricate way that the brain and the body are designed to work. And we see that when there are interruptions to that then that creates problems inside of our body and our brain, and therefore in our mind, and vice versa. So we see that our actual core of who we are is this beautiful biology, and our minds, which drive the brain and the biology. So 3 separate things: mind, brain, body. In our mind as well, we have this optimism bias, this drawn towards love and survival. So anything that's out of that range is going to be upsetting the balance in the mind, the brain, and the body, and creating these physical changes. And I talk about a lot of those in my book based on my recent clinical trials, and I refer to other studies there as well, and that disrupts your physical functioning. Okay, so that's like a quick overview. So when we talk about trauma affecting our identity, think of the trauma event becoming a physical change inside of your brain. It becomes a gravitational field, an electromagnetic field change in your mind. So that means all this energy stuff going in you. It's hard to picture, but When you're dead, you can't do what I'm doing, talk, respond, etc. So there's energy around me, and that energy is electromagnetic energy, photons, gravitational fields. And so everything I'm experiencing is first grabbed and built there, and it goes around us and through us, and then it becomes this physical tree in the brain, and then it changes every cell of the body. So we store every experience in our mind, our brain as trees, and in our body. That's why when we have some kind of traumatic experience and we recall it, post-traumatic stress, recall when it's triggered, you can be years away from the actual original incident, but the same bodily response can occur, that same whoosh. If you haven't dealt with it, it's still there like a volcano and it explodes. And so you get that same physical feeling in your body, the data from your brain, from the thought trees, and then putting the whole experience together is your mind. So when we're doing trauma work, we are looking at all of those signals to unpack this so that we take the power out of this and reframe it, reconceptualize it into something that works for us. But now, when we have that experience, this is the experience and this is the interpretation. Our interpretation of ourselves based on this experience is where the identity starts getting shot. So if someone keeps saying something negative to you or doing something negative to you, like maybe a physical abuse or a verbal abuse as a child, and you keep hearing day in and day out, 63-day cycle. So for years you were hearing the same negative things, or you're having the same physical abuse or whatever it may be. This is huge, strong, pervasive, invasive, and your interpretation of what's happening, this is what's happening, this is your interpretation part of it, is totally distorted. So you're seeing yourself as broken, as shame, as not valued, as stupid, as whatever it is, as not worthwhile, whatever that person has said and done to you, and that's coming from their trauma, which doesn't excuse what they've done because you're the victim here, but they need to do work on fixing themselves up because they're taking their pain out on you. And so you have to protect yourself. And so that interpretation affects your identity. So once you go through the process of healing, and I talk a lot about healing of trauma in my books, and we've done a lot of podcasts on that, and in the Neurocycle app is like me giving you therapy to deal with that. But now I specifically want to focus a little bit more on the identity part. Our interpretation of ourself gets distorted when away from that wired for love mode, that internal wisdom, that optimism bias, the balance has been disrupted. So it's like there's all these. If you think of a beautiful forest, an exquisite forest with birds singing and these trees are exquisite and it's just like this, it's just all good. It's just phenomenal. So you walk through and you just go like a dream, and it's beautiful flowers and everything. That's who you are. That's the core of your makeup. And it manifests it looks like that kind of thing in your mind, and then it manifests as your beautiful brain and body biology. And when we have things happen to us, that gets disrupted. So think of it like these trees are being built all around that beautiful forest. There's these black trees. So you've got to kind of get through these black trees to these toxic, alive, awful trees to get to the truth of who you are. And depending on the level of complexity, how long the trauma went on, your coping skills, what happened to you, this is a very unique and complex situation each time. So the overarching picture is these trees, but how many, how far down it goes, down the line of the forest, how thick they are, etc., is depend on each unique situation. But the issue is that it's clouding your view of who you are. So to get your identity back after trauma requires going into your wise mind and spending time understanding identity. And that's why I strongly recommend that you listen to the Identity podcast as well. And even if you spend 63 days, which is the minimum amount of time it's going to take to wire in an understanding of who you really are, I would start with that. I would start with the 63-day cycle where you take that information from that particular podcast, use the app or use the book, and actually spend your time just wiring in what identity actually is. This whole thing that I've been telling you about your brain and body and mind are wired for this, and take that information and unpack it. I have a book called The Perfect You, where I describe this in detail. I also have in my book, Think, Learn, Succeed, where I talk in quite a lot of detail about this intrinsic wired for love nature. So in finding your identity, you first have to believe that you have it, and belief starts with you getting knowledge. And I'm talking about you wiring in the science of identity. And that wiring in of that science of identity is building in an identity insurance policy. Because I'm pretty certain if you're listening to me and you're battling with restoring your identity after trauma, that it's very hard to accept what I'm saying. That you're actually phenomenal, that you're amazing, that there's something that you can do that no one else can do, that no one is competition for you, that you are your own category, and that this is not motivation, this is science, hardcore science, and that your psychoneurobiology is all geared for your unique specialization. And you have these 200 specializations across your brain, and they are, only you can use those in your way with all this complex circuitry, and no one can bring to the table the piece of the puzzle that you are, because if you don't show up in who you are and develop who you are, that piece of the puzzle is always missing. So if everyone in this world is a piece of the puzzle and you're not showing up in who you are, that piece of puzzle is missing. That's how important your identity is. You enhance me, I enhance you. So that belief you may have to spend 63 days working on, using the Neurocycle, gathering awareness of these facts, reflecting on them deeply, taking maybe one fact each day and taking 21 facts over the first 21 days, and then growing those into a stable memory over the next 42, because that's how the system works. The first 21 is that you're building something in, deconstructing, reconstructing, and then you are stabilizing and growing that over the next 42 days. And I walk you through that in the book and in the app. Okay, and so you may have to take these negative statements that you have about yourself, that you instinctively know are not true, but there's a huge chasm between what you kind of instinctively know, but you can't quite get your head around because of this. So that's like the number one thing, is you're going to really have to understand the science of identity. And then after that, you can then start going a little deeper and taking maybe each statement that was spoken over you and reconceptualizing that. So what I'm going to do is give you an overarching kind of 5-step neurocycle, which is just, you can't just do this once for it to change you. It's just kind of how you would approach this with these 5 steps, and you would take that and break that down into the 63 days. And you would do this as many times as you need until you start feeling that you are starting to restore who you really are, and starting to feel who you really are. A lovely story I heard years ago, I'm just looking at my notes here, that I want to share, is a beautiful story about a little boy that was watching an artist. There was a huge big block of marble, and there was this artist every day who was like chipping away at this huge big block of marble day after day. And day after day, this little boy would come and sit there and watch. And then eventually one day, this was in Italy, he could not contain his curiosity anymore. And he said, "Hey, signore, what are you doing? Why are you hitting that rock?" And Michelangelo turned around to this little boy and said, "Because inside this block is an angel waiting to come out. And I'm chipping away to let the angel come free." And I thought that's just like one of the nicest stories I heard. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it sounds like it could definitely be true. And that was the statue of David that Michelangelo was sculpting. And it was a work of art. And not that David was an angel, but there was this beautiful angel inside. There was this beautiful creation inside. And that's what you are. There's a beautiful creation, but life puts this block around us. And extensive abuse does that. So you have to chip away, and it takes time. So the Neurocycle is your chisel. The 5 steps of the Neurocycle, and all the things that go around the brain preparation and the mindset and giving yourself grace and the kindness, all the things that I teach you in the Neurocycle and the things I talk about on this podcast to help you understand are your chisel daily, chipping away at that rock to let the angel inside out, to let you out and unleash you on the world with something you can do that no one else can do. And we all suffer until you actually are being who you are designed to be. And it can be done. And that's why I use this story, because like you look at a big block of marble and you look at how many years it took to chisel that into that magnificent statue of David, which I've seen. And it's just like unbelievable that you can get a block of marble to that. That can be done. It's hard work. It takes time. And that's what we've just got to mentally prepare our mind for, that it is there. We just got to keep going till we find it. And you might have to do a 63-day Neurocycle believing that there is an angel inside that block. That may just be all you do for 1 minute a day. You can do the 5 steps in 1 minute a day for 63 days just to believe that. And so these are simple steps you can take. If you think I can't do all the complex stuff, well then just start there for 63 days. For 1 minute a day, use the 5 steps. help yourself to understand that underneath this block is this beautiful you waiting to come out. And that all those lies spoken over you, all that abuse, all that trauma is that big block around you, but it can come off. But you're going to have to chisel away at that. And people can help you along the way and pass you the chisel, encourage you, but you have to do the chipping away at your own block. You can't get someone else to chip away. But your therapist, coach can help and guide you and encourage you. And the chisel is the neurocycle, because it's a science of how you get your mind to change and rewire your mind, to change your mind, to rewire your brain and your body. Okay, so basically, here's a basic neurocycle to help you get going. Okay, so always start with brain prep. And I mentioned that already. You've got to prepare your brain, because when you start dealing with something like, I'm hopeless, I'm useless, I can't do this. And I mean, I've worked with enough people that have felt hopeless in their life, suicidal, etc., to know that this is not easy. And that when you start trying to deal with stuff that has happened to you, it's hard. So you have to prepare your brain, because your brain's going to get a reaction. You're going to have neurochemical chaos. You're going to have adrenaline rushes. And you need to know how to calm and decompress those things. So the brain preparation helps you to get the neurochemistry under control, etc. And I do, in the app, I give you a 2 to 3 minute brain prep every day. In the book, I've got examples. One of my favorite is a 10-second pause breathing, which you would have heard me teach many times before if you've listened to me, but honestly, it's very powerful. And there's many different ones. I mean, you can use tapping, havening, you can use all kinds of things. And as I said in the app, I give you 21 different ideas of brain prep. And you're coming into the neurocycle with so much kindness for yourself. So before you begin the brain prep, you're telling yourself, this is not who I am. This is who I've become. I'm finding the block inside, that kind of thing, giving yourself grace, seeing that angel inside the block, that kind of stuff. That's why I said, listen to the identity podcast, do maybe a whole neurocycle just where you work on trying to understand the science of identity and wiring that in as this identity tree in your brain that becomes literally a lattice onto which as you now fixing your identity, you can hang it onto this. This is the truth. This is who I really am. And just hearing me say it once is not enough. But if you practice it 63 days, you'll build this into your brain and you'll have it there. And that'll be then the resilience that you use, your insurance policy, your identity insurance policy to help you fix your identity. And then here's now when you're doing once you've done all of that, and now you're actually starting to really unpack and find out who you really are and really release that angel. Here's a basic overarching neurocycle. So first of all, you're going to gather awareness. 5 steps: gather, reflect, write into the metacog, recheck, active reach. Okay, each is doing phenomenal things in the mind, brain, and body. I have a great chart in here that shows that when you do step 1, this is happening in your mind, your brain, your body. When you do step 2, this is happening in your mind, your brain, and your body. Don't skip a step, don't add a step. That is the science of how you drive your mind to drive your neuroplasticity and rewire. So step 1 is gather awareness. Gather means that you're controlling it. You're gathering. If you go and gather apples in an orchard, you're not standing under the apple tree and they're all landing on your head. You are going and choosing the apple tree, and you're choosing the apples, and you're picking the apple and you're putting that into your basket. Okay, so it's gathering, you're controlling, you're getting agency, you're being empowered. You have the ability to control the situation. So you're going to gather awareness. Just let me step back one step. Quickly, the brain preparation, I started explaining but didn't finish explaining. That one of the great techniques is breathing. We all know that. We hear so much about that. One of my favorite is the 10-second pause. And I have a variation of that, different variations of that in my book and my app. But basically you breathe in for 3 counts, but super deep so that your whole abdomen expands and really deep. And then you push out for 7 counts, but you force it out. And that pushes oxygen and blood flow to the front of your brain, calms down your neurochemistry. Do that 6 to 9 times, which is 60 to 90 seconds. And that helps to get that brain prepared for the work of finding your identity after trauma. Okay, you can do that each day as you do this. You're not going to fix your trauma in one day. I've already said it. I'll say it again. You're going to have to go through this 63-day cycle. The first 21 days, you spend 15 to 45 minutes. And the second 42 days, you spend about 5 minutes. First 21 days, you do the 5 steps, 15 to 45 minutes. The second 42 days, you do the 5 steps for around about 5 minutes. Okay? So, overarching example of now gathering awareness, coming back to that self, back to the neurocycle. What do you gather awareness of? You gather awareness of the distorted beliefs about yourself. Now, the first day you do it, you're not going to find all of them. You're gathering. You might only find 2. And then day 2, you may find another one. And day 3, you may find none because you're trying to still deal with the first 3. And day 5, you may find 5. And so it goes on. And maybe by day 6 and 7, you think you've got all of them and you go for a few days. And day 14, you find another one. And so it's gathering awareness of these distorted beliefs about yourself, these interpretations that have come from the origin, the experience. Okay? So these hide behind, or you'll find them, if you want to look for them and find what they are, they hide behind emotions. So the distorted beliefs which are in here are hiding behind, or you can tune into them from being a thought detective. The clues to those, if you think of yourself as a thought detective, the clues are in your emotions, which are warning signals. They're in your behaviors. They're in your bodily symptoms like GI issues or whatever, and they're in your perspective, how you're looking at life based on that experience. Okay, so these hide behind the warning signals of panic attacks, hovering anxiety, irritability, obsessions, emotional numbing, detachment, depression, shame, and guilt. So those are the kind of but those are the kind of standard emotional warning signals that are clues for you that there's an identity issue. I'll read them again. Panic attacks, hovering anxiety, anger, irritability, obsessions, emotional numbing, and detachment, depression, shame, and guilt. Now, obviously, those emotions are common to a lot of different scenarios, but those few seem to be very related to identity issues, and they can also be part of other things too. Okay, so it's not a fixed list, it's just a guidance. So you go from these to then your behaviors. So maybe you find that maybe kind of aggressive or maybe very sensitive or whatever, to your perspective that, you're just like, I'm worthless. And to your emotional signals in your body, maybe you suffer from terrible GI issues. So you go grab those. Then step 2, you reflect. You start reflecting on what you've gathered into your basket. And the reflection is all around, okay, this is what I've gathered, but this is not who I am. This is who I've become because of this, okay? And this interpretation and the distorted processing. And so you start reflecting on those. It's coming from the abuse, the neglect, and a lot of distorted, toxic messages that you have heard about who you are. So the reflect is to say, okay, this is the emotion. This is the thought pattern. And those emotions and behaviors have led to, this is the actual, so from the signals, you go to the actual statements about yourself. And those statements now you're reflecting on. And those statements are telling you basically things about how you're seeing yourself. So you need to tell us, when you're reflecting, you're asking, answering, discussing, is this true? Where does this come from? Who said this? Why did they say this? When did they say that? So you're starting to gather information around how those could have built up. And you're doing this with your wise mind talking to your messy mind. I often used to tell my patients, put 2 chairs next to each other. And I would do this in my therapy practice. And I'd have them sit in one and they're also in the other one. So the wise mind and messy mind. And the wise mind is talking to the messy mind in this accepting, forgiving, loving, safe environment. Okay? And then as you're doing the reflect, you're also going to try to identify the who you are statements and who they came from and when they came from, where they came from. So these distorted statements that people have said over you, what are they? What are the specifics? What are the details? What was actually said? Who said it? When did they say it? And you're not going to get that on day 1, all of it. You're going to get just a little bit. Each day you'll get more information. Day 4, day 7, day 14, day 21, each are very, very, very revelatory days. And then you've got a good package by day 21, and then you're going to stabilize those over the next 42 days. And then you may find you still need to do a lot. I'm pretty much guarantee you're going to have to do another cycle to unpeel another layer of the onion, lots of layers to get down to lots of, now use another analogy, onions, but lots, you've only chiseled a bit of the rock. Now you need to do some more chiseling and some more chiseling. So it may be multiple cycles of it. That's okay. There's no time frame in finding you. Just keep doing it, because each chip of that block is revealing you and helping you start to heal. And you're also being constructive. You're being deliberate. You're being intentional. You're taking control. You're getting your life back. You're not letting this own you. You are in a system of recovery. You're doing an active brain science system that is changing your brain and changing your mind and changing your body and bringing you to the light, releasing the angel. Step 3, write down. So always gather awareness, reflect, and then write in the metacog, which is a way of organizing information that actually helps the 2 sides of the brain really work together, activates the 200 specialities so that you can get super deep and get the wise mind working very intuitively and deeply with the messy mind in order to manage the process. So you get incredibly insightful And as you use the metacog more and more, so you get more and more insightful. Recheck is the fourth step. So you're going to be writing, sorting out what you've written onto the metacog, looking for the patterns and so on. And so in step 4, the recheck, what you're going to do is you're going to start picking, specifically with getting identity back after trauma. You are going to be picking apart what has become entwined into your true identity. So this has become entwined into your true identity. So these are the trees down the side of the you, and they can't get in, but they're blocking you getting in. They've created this like a wall. So as you do the neurocycle, you're chopping these down, and not just chopping them down because they'll grow back again. You're actually taking the soil away from the roots, and you are upending them. One negative statement at a time, one of these negative statements at a time, okay? One tree at a time is falling down, and that does take time. That's chipping away at the block, okay? So you're picking apart what has blocked your true identity or become entwined into your true identity. It's very helpful to label or highlight on your metacog the experience and the effect, okay? So that was the statement, and that was the effect. So in the recheck step, you can look at this statement was said over you like you're useless. And the effect, how did it make you feel? And that you would have captured from gather and reflect and the writing. And you can highlight those in different colors, because now you're going to start saying, okay, well, that was what was said. And that's the impact. What's the reframing? What's the reconceptualization? What's the truth? And you may not believe it as you're saying it, but you will know what the truth is, because the truth is that you aren't useless. And the impact was it made you feel useless. So that's not good. That's not survival. That's not your wired for love. So you are useful. There's something you can do that no one else can do. But you're not going to believe that on day 1. You're only going to start believing that on day 63, around there, okay? So don't give up. Keep going. Next to the toxic untrue statement about you, write the opposite statement. So for example, maybe you were told you'll never be good enough for anyone. Change this to I am good enough. I can do something no one else can do. You won't believe this at first, as I said, but follow through. So here's some more examples. So let's say someone has said to you, you are so sensitive, you are oversensitive. You can say, or you can write, I am aware and honor my emotions because they are valid. There is nothing wrong with feeling deeply. Maybe someone said to you, maybe one of those distorted statements that was spoken over you was, you are so aggressive. Your counter, your reconceptualized statement would be, I am passionate. Not always able to channel it correctly, but I am learning. Next one, you always do that. The reconceptualization, I have done it in the past, but I am learning what to do and what not to do. My past does not define my future. See, these are the things you do in the recheck step. If you haven't done the brain prep, the gather, the reflect, and the write, you're not going to get the same effect. Okay, so this has got to come at the right place, or it doesn't wire in properly. Okay, the toxic doesn't wire out properly, and the good doesn't wire in. Next statement, you are useless. That's the toxic. The reconceptualized, I am not someone else's definition of useful. I define for me what useful is. Toxic one, no one will ever be able to love you with your emotional highs and lows. Reconceptualization, the right person will love me for who I am and not for what I can offer the world. You can never get anything right. Healthy, I embrace mistakes as learning opportunities and choose not to love by anyone else's definitions or standards. So those are some examples of reconceptualizations. But you've got to have gone through the previous steps. And you're not going to get this all on day 1, as I keep saying. It takes time to get these. And even in the 42 days, you'll get more and more insight. It's amazing how much growth will happen, because that's the growth and stabilization phase. At day 21, this has become this. By day 42, it has become this, has grown into this. By day 63, we're looking at a real big, strong bush. A nice, beautiful insurance policy that is moving towards your identity. There's starting to be a shape behind the block. Okay? So in the recheck, you also allow yourself to remember. This is really important when you do the recheck. Give yourself permission to remember and mourn the loss of who you were before the trauma statements were spoken into your life. So there was a point where maybe there was no point. Maybe you can't even remember that far. But if you can, remember being happy and then the trauma happening. Remember, give yourself a chance to mourn who you were before. And maybe don't have memories before that. But give yourself a chance to still mourn who you know now you were, or who you are, and what you could have been at that stage and what you've lost. Like, give yourself a chance to mourn. Okay? See who you have become since and decide broadly who you want to be. I'm going to read that to you again. So in the recheck, you also allow yourself to remember and mourn the loss of who you were before the trauma statements were spoken into your life. See who you have become since and decide broadly who you want to be. Last step, active reach. Remember, you do this every day, 15 to 45 minutes for the first 21, 5 minutes or so for the next 42. Active reaches help you to rewire your identity and to anchor you daily as you rediscover your customized way of thinking, as you find the angel inside. So the work that you do each day as you go into the business of the day, so you do this in the morning for 5 minutes, but then you go into the business of the day and you can get thrown off. So you need an anchoring statement to keep you back in your at the level that you've come in your work using the Neurocycle that day. So that could be things like, if you can tell yourself things like, if my brain changes in response to experience, then my brain can change in response to the new experiences that I create. So I'm creating a new experience, or I see the past as that's what happened to me, but that's not who I am. Who I am is this beautiful forest. Another thing you can do is also get very comfortable with being with yourself, learning to spend time just appreciating yourself. So take maybe 5 minutes in the day where you just think, hey, I'm amazing, and just think of how amazing you are. Just tell yourself how amazing you are. Look at some great things that you've done. Really try and focus in on how beautiful and amazing you are, and how much you can contribute to the world. And think of your dreams. What do you want to do? How do you want to help other people? How do you want to impact this life? What do you want to leave behind? What's your legacy? Spend maybe 5 minutes or 1 minute each day thinking about that and write it down. Okay, so those are some things that you can do. Here's another one. Here's another great one. Think of all the times you've given good advice to someone. That shows your identity showing up. So think of those. These are all anchoring things to remind yourself that there is this beautiful core inside of you. So you want to go back to the toxic identity, you grab at the times that of your dreams of how you know you can impact the world, or the great advice you gave someone. So you go and transfer the tendency to move to the negative and think badly of yourself to the good advice you've given someone. So it's a positive thing, showing that your wisdom and your identity was showing through in those moments. You grab those and you frame those and you focus on those to keep you anchored. I hope this has helped you, and I know and believe that you can restore your identity after trauma. It's hard work, but you can chip away at that block. I know this works. This is scientific. Dive in, understand this, get into the Neurocycle, get the book, get the app, and restore and recover your beautiful identity. Remember, you can do something that no one else can do, and we need you. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next time.